The Baltimore Ravens make a move. Diontae Johnson on his way to Baltimore from the Carolina Panthers. The Ravens bolster their offense. And we talk about the deal, Diontae Johnson, what it all means, and could there be more for the Ravens? All that and more on an instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day, your first or maybe second listen if you listen to this morning's episode of Locked On Ravens of the day. We appreciate you being here. I appreciate you being here, and we have a lot to talk about today here. We're free and available for you, of course, all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe. Also, in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe there as well. 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage, including instant reactions after every piece of Ravens big news. And we have a trade to talk about today. So super, super exciting. Diontae Johnson is now a member of the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll talk about what the move means, who Diontae Johnson is as a player, because there is a lot to dive into with this move. Quickly, though, we're going to get into a lot of different things besides Diontae Johnson, because I know a lot of people would like a move on the defensive side of the ball. So we're going to go through everything in terms of what else could potentially be on the horizon for this Ravens team. Today's instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Man, I was expecting a move for the Ravens. I didn't necessarily, we talked about it this morning on the episode with Qadry Ismail, former Ravens receiver. We expected a move, but this kind of happened all pretty quickly. Diontae Johnson's name has started to get floated around in those rumors about, oh, he's probably going to be dealt. Baltimore certainly could have stood to add a wide receiver. You know, I get that from a holistic perspective, we're going to grade this trade deadline once it's over, right? We're a week away, okay? We're going to just talk about this move is its own, and then we're also going to talk about what could be coming down the line. So this move on its own is Diontae Johnson, is a very well-established veteran, was traded to Carolina in the offseason in exchange for Diontae Jackson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Baltimore obviously very well acquainted with Diontae Johnson. From this move only, just separating it from all of other Baltimore's needs, of all of those needs, I think it's a really solid move. I think for a receiver of Diontae Johnson's caliber, giving up your own 5th-round pick for Carolina's 6th-round pick, I mean, that's essentially getting him for free, because you're probably only moving down what? If you know, not saying the Ravens are winning the Super Bowl or anything, but let's say their pick is in the mid to high 20s, low 30s this year, and Carolina has a top 5, top 10 pick, you're probably only moving down, 5, 10 spots to go get a player who can help you now in Diontae Johnson. He's going to be a free agent after this season, but now the reports are that Carolina is helping Baltimore out with this deal and paying some of his remaining salary. So the move would have been, he'd have about, I believe, $3-ish million left on that deal. Carolina's paying some of that salary. So now I believe the number is $625,000 is what Baltimore is on the hook for moving forward, which again, like the Ravens in the wide receiver room, we had talked about it, right? They need some level of, okay, could you get a third wide receiver that could maybe split time with Nelson Agholor or even push Nelson Agholor down to a 4? Because you have Zay Flowers and you have Rashad Bateman. I get Rashad had a tough week last week. It was a tough week for really all the receivers last week. But getting a Diontae Johnson, you can slot him in as that third wide receiver. And you're not necessarily taking away snaps from Rashad Bateman. You're not taking away snaps from Zay Flowers. There's no competition. And now you have, I think, a top 3 of Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Diontae Johnson. That's decently solid. You know, it's not Devontae Adams. It's not Amari Cooper. It's not, you know, depending on how you think about DeAndre Hopkins. I personally don't think it's DeAndre Hopkins here, but I think it's an overall sound move for very little cost and very little risk, right? Now, is this the be-all, end-all for the Ravens? I hope not, right? I hear and look, I see everybody in the chat talking about defense, right? You know, I hear you. The Ravens should go out there and get a pass rusher or a member of the secondary. I don't think this should be it. I don't think they should be done. They should do more. But if we're just cutting off that conversation and we're just talking about this move as its own thing, I really like it. I really like it for the Ravens. Now, Diontae Johnson for Carolina this season has played in 7 games for them over the course of the year. It's been a pretty solid season overall, I'd say. He's not blowing anything out of the water here, but 30 catches for 357 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he's somebody that can go get you yards. He's good for a big play here and there. And for Diontae Johnson, he's a shifty route runner, and this Ravens team is full of route runners. I know, he's not like the best route runner in the league, but he is shifty in that he can separate at the top of his routes and kind of just, reading both when he was in Pittsburgh and just in Carolina. One of the things that makes him good as a route runner, and it's one of the things Zay Flowers is very good at, is he gears down. With a lot of guys, or maybe not a lot, but with some guys with route running, when they gear down, it's very clunky, right? You can tell when they're gearing down, and as a defensive back, you can adjust to that and alter your course of action. With guys like Zay and Diontae is to a less, I think Zay is one of the best in the league at doing this, but Diontae to a lesser extent. When those guys gear down, it's a very smooth, fluid movement, right? Slow, fluid movement. That to me is really what it is. Now, his route running has improved over the course of his career as well. He also uses his body well and can make catches outside of his frame. His route tree is very full. There are a lot of routes that he can run. I think that will be something that Todd Monken will do with him. But there are issues with drops. Drops is the big thing with Diontae Johnson. And obviously, I think that's kind of like, duck and cover, shield your eyes type deal after what we saw last week. So at the end of the day, the drops have to stop, and they really haven't for Diontae over the course of his career. That's the big thing that you got to worry about with Diontae is the drops, right? It is. And I think for him, when we talk about things being contagious for teams, okay, drops can be contagious. For him, he sometimes, I don't know if it's getting in his head or whatnot, and we saw this even when Baltimore played Pittsburgh, when Diontae was still with the Steelers. He can get in his own head, and that can lead to just a spiral for him. There are also questions about the effort at times from Diontae. There have been a couple of incidents with his effort and, his want to there. And he also, and we see this with a lot of guys, he tries to do too much sometimes when he's in the open field, and that causes him, back juking into losses of yards and stuff along those lines. He's not great as a blocker either. You shouldn't be using him in that situation. I don't think they necessarily will. But when he's frustrated, he shows it, right? It's poor body language. He gets upset, gets frustrated. And I think that's one of the reasons Pittsburgh was willing to move off of him, because I think on the field, look, he's a great player with some, cons you got to worry out for. But, this is what it is. And yeah, Terrence, I hear you. This year it's not been bad for Diontae in terms of drops. But over the course of his career, the longevity of his career, drops have been a big thing for Diontae. He's gotten better at it. But, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And yes, again, the compensation, 5th round pick going to Carolina, Diontae Johnson, and a 6th round pick going back to the Ravens. And look, Nick has a point right here. Let's talk about this for a second, right? This move along with 11 draft picks shows me Mr. EDC is making more trades to help the defense, right? This is what I'm talking about. The Ravens still have 11 draft picks. Nick, this is a great point. They still have 11. They should not be done. They shouldn't be done. I get that there's frustration because it's not a defensive move. I understand. The Ravens, I think, need to make 1, if not 2, defensive moves, right? But there was also this thing where here's how I look at this. All right, let's go back to last offseason. Nelson Aguilar was signed by the Ravens, and everybody hated the move. Everybody was on here talking about, oh, this move is terrible. This move is awful, horrible. And I said, if this is it, it's not great. If the Ravens add somebody else, then we can look back on it. And the Ravens signed Odell, and obviously it didn't work out for Odell, but it was the point of they needed to sign a vet, and they signed 2 of them. But with Nelson Aguilar, he ended up being better than Odell, if we're being honest. So let's look at it this way. if this is it for the Ravens at the trade deadline, if their only move is Diontae Johnson, it's a failure of a trade deadline, in my opinion. All right. Because they need to add defensively. They do. They need to add defensively. If it's Diontae Johnson and a pass rusher, Diontae Johnson and a secondary member, then I think we can look at this and look at it with refreshed eyes, a refreshed opinion, right? And Max, this is a point here too, right? Are we acting like the Ravens don't need another receiver? Worst case, he helps Zay and Bate get open. It's another weapon. Was receiver the biggest need for the Ravens? No. Receiver is not the biggest need for the Ravens, which is why they need to do more, right? They need to do more to add to this team to make sure that they are at their absolute best heading into the playoffs, right? They can't do it. But in terms of them barely giving up anything here, they're getting a player that I think is either on par, if not better, than Nelson Agholor, right? I think that's what the whole point was, where it's don't take snaps away from Rashad if you don't have to. Don't take snaps away from Zay if you don't have to. But go and get somebody that can be a weapon, yeah. But now you have another weapon. Now you need to shift your focus if you're the Ravens to the defensive side of the ball, all right? To the defensive side of the ball. Now it's all defense time. You don't need another receiver. You don't need anything more on the offensive side of the ball. The defense is the big issue right now. Diontae Johnson is a start. It's a start, but it cannot be the end, right? It cannot be the end. So they have to be able to go out there and make a big move on the defensive side of the ball. But for the offensive side of the ball, you look at this and you say, hey, this is a start. But let's see what they can do. Let's see what they do over the next week. But yeah, here, flagship right here. Not sure if he's an upgrade over Bate, but for sure Nelly. Yeah, I don't think at this point, I think the Ravens have full trust in Rashad. They're not trying to go in there and take his snaps away. I get it was a rough game for him on Sunday. Rough is probably a nice way to put that. But right, this is something where now Nelson Agholor is back to being your fourth wide receiver. And I feel a lot more confident in that group as opposed to Nelson being your 3. So let's just see what it is, right? Let's see how it all unfolds for him. We're going to be back here. I'm probably going to be doing an instant reaction after the trade deadline, regardless of if the Ravens do anything or not next week. And we can look back on this as either, okay, this was the start, and then the Ravens went over and they added a pass rusher, or they added a secondary member, or that was it. And we have to look back on this and be like, they probably got a little too stingy with their draft picks and they needed to add somebody else, but they didn't. And by the way, Diontae up in 500. Thank you for this. He's 5'10". Yes, he is. He's a 5'10" receiver, 183 pounds. He's not your bit. I will say this about it. This is not the type of receiver the Ravens needed. He's a talented player, but it's not the type of receiver the Ravens needed. If I had my pick of guys or prototypes, I guess, bigger bodied player is what the prototype I would have gone with. But now, Devontae's out of the equation, Amari's out of the equation, DeAndre's out of the equation. I don't think Cooper Kupp's getting moved at this point. I think they needed to add something on offense, but they need to add something on defense more. So if this move stops them from adding defense, I don't like it as much. If they can add Diontae and the defensive playmaker, I like it. But for now, if we're just grading or talking about the move, and yep, I see this one. Sutton was the one. That would have been my top choice, but I'm sure Denver either didn't want to move him or the draft capital was too high. But to me, I think if we look at this move just by itself, I think it's a fine move. I think it's a fine move for the Ravens as a start. But let's see how they finish out the deadline. Coming up in the second part of the show, I'll be talking more about what the move means for Baltimore. And of course, if the Ravens could be adding more potentially on the defensive side of the ball, hopefully on the defensive side of the ball. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot coming your way on this instant reaction trade edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. And look, FanDuel has so much that they have to offer. I know for me on FanDuel, I'm looking at everything. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats for that play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to start over $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make everyone more. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We are back our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still here with you on this instant reaction edition of the show. Man, Diontae Johnson officially a member of the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens make that move, add to their offense. No, it is not a defensive player, right? Not a defensive player. Hopefully they go there next. They don't need any more on the offensive side of the ball. Better than anything, Diontae Johnson, and I see Falele. I hear everybody with the offensive line stuff. Here's what I'll say about the offensive line. With offensive line, you kind of just have to go into the season with what you have. And the Ravens decided to go, and they went young. They lost 3 starters. They didn't really add. And the offensive line, tough week against Cleveland, but I thought week 1 and week 2 were bad. The offensive line was part of the reason why they lost those games. I thought that they have improved, but Cleveland's defensive front is pretty vaunted. So, when they play more vaunted pass rushes, how is that going to look? But offensive line trades, unless you're willing to give up a premium for a guy, or unless you're willing to overpay for a guy, those trades don't usually happen. So I'd expect the Ravens to attack offensive line hard in the offseason. But in terms of right now, the wide receiver market is absolutely flowing right now with again, Diontae Johnson being the latest name there. I get it. He's not the name DeAndre is. DeAndre Hopkins is not the name Devontae Adams is. Amari Cooper is. He's not a big-bodied player either. I would have preferred a guy like Cortland Sutton. But I think he is better than Nelson Aguilar, and he does add an element to your offense, especially you're adding another great route runner to an already good team of route runners. That's going to make things even more difficult for this opposing defense the Ravens have to play, whoever it is. Next week, or this upcoming week, it's Denver. They'll have a lot of other options as well. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to see if there's anything else on the docket. And so here's where I kind of say what this move means for the Ravens. I think it probably meant that they didn't feel comfortable enough with their depth at wide receiver. I think they feel confident enough in Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. I think after that, they had a whole lot of questions. They had a whole lot of questions when it came to, okay, who's it going to be after Rashad Bateman? Is Nelson Aguilar good enough to be that guy? They obviously don't trust Tez Walker right now. Tylan Wallace, is he good enough to be that guy? I think that they feel like Diontae Johnson can be that steady veteran. Hopefully, the thing with Diontae is just you got to worry a little bit about how's it going to look, because Deontay's moving from an offense, or at least multiple different offenses, and Pittsburgh's offense was not all that in the final years of him being there. But, with Lamar spreading the ball around, it is better for receivers to come into this as opposed to what it was when Lamar wasn't spreading the ball around. But this is still a run-first team. At least, that's how you get there. So we'll see what Diontae ends up looking like in a Ravens uniform. But I think they ended up making a move for it's a 5th round pick, and they're getting back a 6th. Essentially, again, you're moving down 15 or 20 spots. Again, you're essentially getting him for nothing. But the main takeaway from me is that I don't think Baltimore felt good enough about their depth, right? I don't think they felt good enough about it wide receiver wise. But now you're done. Okay, this was the move offensively. This was the move, right? That's what it is. So now you have to move to the defensive side of the ball. And one more time, I'll say it again. It's Diontae Johnson and Carolina's 6th round pick coming back for Baltimore's 5th round pick. So I see a lot of questions about what the Ravens gave up. So that is what they gave up. Now, before we get into other moves they could make, let's play a game. All right. I love doing these games when we do the lives. Shout out to everybody who's in the live here today on Locked On Ravens. And if you're not watching this live, if you are listening to it after the fact in audio form, if you're watching back in video form, let's grade this trade. All right, let's just grade it. So in the comments, if you're live, in the comments, if you are watching after the fact, or if you're listening in audio form, you can message me on Twitter about the move. What is your grade for this deal? A through F. A, B, C, D, F. You can put E there if you want to, if you're kind of in the middle of D and F, but obviously E is not a real grade. So A through F. Let's see it. What do we got? Me, if we're just grading this move in a vacuum, I mean, I'm saying it's anywhere from a B+ to an A-. I mean, you're essentially getting a guy for free in Diontae Johnson. It's not the bigger bodied player. That's where I'm docking off a little bit. It's not the bigger bodied receiver. Diontae does not fit that mold. And there are a couple other things you got to worry about. But you're adding a It's a move for Baltimore. How do I phrase this? It's a move for the Ravens that I think can pay off, but we'll see if a lack of bigger bodied player comes back to bite them, right? And sure, Dom, look, let's talk about it like this. It's a D if it's the only trade we make. That's fair. I'm willing to say that's fair. All right. D for defense is what Dom is saying here. D for defense. All right. That's how it would be. Okay. Don't like this as much as if this was the only move that the Ravens make. If they only go out there and make a trade for a wide receiver, right? But if we're just talking about it from, let's separate that and let's just assume the Ravens make a move, right? Let's just assume the Ravens get a pass rusher or a secondary member just for the sake of assuming it. If they do that, we can look back on this deal. It's its own thing and say, yeah, they got a decently solid veteran wide receiver for free. For free. And if you want to even put it on top of one other thing, they kept them away from their competition, right? Maybe Kansas City would go after another wide receiver. Maybe Buffalo go after another wide receiver. Maybe Houston, after losing Stephon Diggs, he tore his ACL. So there's all that, there are multiple different aspects of what it means. And Ashley here saying EDC lost nothing with it and adds to our depth in a positive way. Yeah, I do think it adds to the depth in a positive way, right? Is he a needle mover? The Ravens are winning the Super Bowl because Diontae Johnson is a member of the Ravens? No, I'm not going that far. I think I'd be a little foolish if I went that far. But I think in a way it makes them better in a lot of different ways, right? A lot of different ways. So I think that the Ravens, they had a need at wide receiver. It just gets overshadowed because their need on defense is more. And we can all say that, right? We can all say that the Ravens need a pass rusher more than they needed a wide receiver. They need a safety probably more than they need a wide receiver. But that doesn't mean they didn't need a wide receiver. Doesn't mean they didn't need to go out there and get another weapon for Lamar Jackson and this offense. So that to me is where I'm trying to separate it from the rest of the Ravens moves, right? I've been saying it the whole show. That's where I see this making sense for the Ravens is if you add a wide receiver and you can add a pass rusher. Hey, guess what? The Chiefs have done that. They got DeAndre Hopkins and Josh Uche. So do the Ravens add Diontae Johnson and do they bring back a familiar face? Is it Zadarius Smith, Jadeveon Clowney, Calais Campbell on the interior? Do they make a move like that? We'll get into some of those other names in the final part of the show coming up in a couple of minutes. But to me, wide receiver was always going to be if they make a trade for a wide receiver, okay, yeah, right? That makes sense. But what makes more sense is going out there and getting a defensive, talented player to add on to that because the Ravens aren't lining up Diontae Johnson as a corner. They're not lining him up as single high as a safety. They're not asking him to rush the passer. This helps the Ravens on the offensive side of the ball. It does. I think it's a great move for the offense. But right now, I think everybody knows it. The biggest glaring hole still is the defense. So hopefully there is something upcoming defensively. I think they absolutely do need to do something there because there is a lot of work to be done. So coming up in the final part of the show, we will get into more names on the defensive side of the ball that could be a possible name for the Ravens over the next week or so. We have a lot coming up here on this Instant Reaction live edition of Locked On Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. There's a lot of trade talk still upcoming after the Ravens acquire Diontae Johnson. First, this show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is the most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. Even the Great American Story, A Land of Hope, is something you can get involved in. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. And this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. I love going on PrizePicks, seeing everything that they have to offer. You can opt to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. So for that Ravens and Browns game, if you had more on the Zay Flowers receiving yards, that was probably a good thing for you over there on PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDON to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDON to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. We return our final segment of Locked On Ravens Instant Reaction Edition. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday, Taco Tuesday. Appreciate everybody. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form, as well as follow along and subscribe in audio form, however you decide to watch or listen to the show. Coming up on 9,000 subscribers in video form. That community has been growing at such a rapid pace, so really appreciate all the video watchers. And also the audio community is growing at a rapid pace as well. It's the same show, both audio and video, so can't say enough about the audio community as well. Social media, subtext. We got everything going here on Locked On Ravens, and the Ravens have things going on the trade market. Again, Diontae Johnson, Panthers wide receiver, coming to the Ravens for a 5th-round pick. Also coming back to Baltimore is a 6th-round pick. And again, we're trying to peruse through social media just to see if there are any other updates on the situation. But, man, it's a move, but it cannot be the only move. Again, that's kind of what I say. If the Ravens make another move, I like this. And hey, you know what? Let's bring up this. Let's Marcus Peters, right? I think we ain't done yet, right? Hopefully that's what it is. We're not done yet. Let's hope that the Ravens are not done. So, I see Kevin, shout out to the name, by the way. Kevin saying, I don't see us trading for a safety due to the money we already have allocated. That's why I think corner might be the other option. So let's start this off this way. Kevin, I hear what you're saying. Definitely. Options for safety include guys like Budda Baker, Javon Holland. There are a couple other names out there that could make sense. What the Ravens might try to do is try to see if there's somebody who has that corner safety versatility and someone who has versatility. So that's why I point to maybe Javon Holland from Miami as a guy. Miami's 2-4 right now. And I hear this as well, with Diontae talking about, doesn't get his head around outside of a few busted coverages. He's been a guy getting mossed, doesn't turn to track the ball. I don't know who is that in reference to, Flagship. I can't remember if that. Tell me, Flagship, who that is in reference to, so we can talk about it a little more. But in terms of the corner and the safety position, corner wise, they didn't have Moreland, they didn't have Nate Wiggins, right? They didn't have those 2 guys on Sunday. So when you get those 2 guys back, I think what Baltimore's probably going to say is, okay, 3 solid corners. Millette is back now. You can play Darius Washington, Jalen Armour-Davis. Feels like they have a lot more confidence in him this season. I feel like that is probably going to deter them from adding just a pure corner. Now, in terms of a safety, yeah, I think that's probably the move I would make in the secondary. Oh, Stevens. Okay, yep. I hear you. Okay, it was Stevens. So that's what Flagship was talking about. Yeah, Brandon Stevens is a guy that, look, I think if we're being honest, has probably lost a little bit of money this season because of the fact, right? And yeah, okay, so yes, Flagship, definitely. In regards to Stevens, I see you. Stevens, in terms of separation, he's not giving up a ton of separation. But the big thing with Brandon Stevens, he's not turning his head around for the ball. That's exactly correct. So the numbers, and you look at some of the advanced stats, and I know some people feel a certain way about the advanced analytics and, that doesn't mean this, that, and the other. Stevens, in terms of separation, it was a rough game for him against Cleveland. But overall, I think he's playing a little better than the stats in, the eye test actually shows. But when you're talking about secondary, this is what I've been saying. If you've been listening to me on Locked On Ravens here, you know this. Secondary and pass rush, they're supposed to be married together. Right now, they're living in 2 separate houses. They're divorced. They're single. They're not doing their thing together, right? And so, Tony, Ravens don't have a pass rush. Pass rush was great to start the season. Kyle Van Noy was doing his thing. Nafaoe was making plays. David Ajabo did something here and there. They bring in Yannick Ngakoue. He makes a couple plays. Last month, 3 weeks or so, has been non-existent. And it's a direct correlation. The secondary can't cover, so the pass rush doesn't have as much time to get home. The pass rush can't pass rush. They can't get there. And now your secondary is forced to cover for longer, but, oh, wait, they can't cover. So I hear Marshawn Lattimore as a name, but I think, so my prediction, the most likely thing that I think will happen is the Ravens trade for a pass rusher and they ride it out with the secondary. Is that what I would do? I'd try to add a pass rusher and a secondary member. I'd try to do both. I think they need to do both. But my prediction is that they just add a pass rusher and that will be that. I think it's, guys we mentioned, JV and Clowney, guys like Zadarius Smith, Calais Campbell, right? Those are the guys that I think you should be looking at. There are a couple others as well. Preston Smith, maybe from Green Bay, if they decide to move off of him. But let's play another game. In the chat or in the comments or message me on Twitter if you're listening in audio form. Who is a name or two you would like to see the Ravens trade for? It can be realistic. It can be a dream target. I'll try to see if I can read off a few of them. We can talk about them because let's talk about this and let's keep saying it. The Ravens should not be done. All right? They should not be done. They need to add more on the defensive side of the ball. They need to add on the defensive side of the ball. They do. They do. So I see a bunch of Max Crosby's. I would look. Dream, right? That is the dream, Max Crosby. I don't think it's realistic. Obviously, the Raiders, Crosby himself has said that's not happening. I'm sure for the right price, that would be, right? That would be it. But yeah, Crosby would be like the dream guy. So Kieran saying, can we get Lattimore, Calais, or Tre'Davious White? I think all three are attainable. Lattimore would cost the most. And Tre'Davious, they might just trade him, honestly, they might cut him. They might cut him. And then Calais, yeah, I think that if Miami wants to do right by Calais, maybe they cut him as well. Tre'Davious could be a very intriguing option to me. And I see a lot of people are saying Tre'Davious right now. So, right, could be it. Hey, Joshua, hey, go for Diontae Johnson. Guess what? Guess why we're doing this show right now? Ravens got Diontae Johnson. So a little look back in the past to the future for Joshua right there. So yeah, you get Diontae Johnson for relatively on the cheap. Again, you're trading him and a sixth for a fifth. That to me is a win-win, but and yeah, I see it just a bit outside. I'm like, if you're putting Tre'Davious in as like a depth corner, then fine. At this point, he's kind of washed. That's why Los Angeles is trying to move off of him. Oh, Trayvon Diggs is interesting. I don't think Dallas moves him because despite the fact that their season is lost, I don't think that would be it. You know what? This was a good one too. I think, look, Ojulari is a guy that I was thinking about last night when we were watching that Giants game. Ojulari could be intriguing. The Giants, they're not going anywhere this season. I would love Ojulari. I would be so on board with Ojulari, in my opinion. That's a name that, does he have, the pedigree name? I think Ojulari is really good. And, yeah, all right, I think, hey, look at this. Look, Asmodeus, I think you are the guy. You are the one that has united the chat here. Ojulari is the move. I see a lot of people talking about Ojulari right now. So I think that is the name, all right? Asmodeus had it. BJ Ojulari Ojulari is the move for this Ravens team. So I know there's BJ and Aziz Ojulari. Obviously it's Aziz. BJ is on it. Where even is BJ Ojulari right now? I'm not even sure. He's Arizona. Yep. Okay. So yes, sorry. Aziz Ojulari is the one. BJ is in Arizona. So Aziz Ojulari to the Ravens. And look, he's a guy that a lot of people had mocked for the Ravens early. They had him mocked as the first round pick a couple of years ago. Obviously, New York got him in the second. So I think he'd be a great move. I don't know what it would take. I see Matt saying, is it a fourth rounder for Ojulari? Could be. I'd be fine with that. Hey, give up a fourth and a sixth for Ojulari. Well, I guess, yeah, give up a fourth and here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to do. Fourth and a sixth. The sixth he just got from Carolina. So a fourth and Carolina sixth for Ojulari. How do we like that? Fourth and Carolina sixth for Ojulari. You don't need all those picks for the Ravens. You don't need them. You don't. I get that in the Lamar Jackson era, it's more important than ever to hit on those picks and have as many as you can. But this is a team that if the right moves are made, we can catapult them into top contender status. Not that they're not contenders right now, but looking at this defense, that's not a contending team defense, right? That's not a contending team defense. And I see, okay, maybe for cheaper, maybe you go fifth. Maybe you go fifth and sixth. We'll see what happens there. So I think, yeah, I was thinking about Ojulari last night, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense for the Ravens. And I love that chat is all on board with that. So yeah, for Ojulari, I think that would be the move. Obviously, there's the former Raven aspect as well if they decide to go there. But I think we're all in agreement, whether you like the Diontae Johnson move or not, that the Ravens need more. Okay. And I'll be the first. All right. You can clip this. You can bookmark it. You can save this video for later. If the Ravens do not make another move, this trade deadline is a failure for them. All right. Let's be honest about that because they need defense. They need defense. Adding Diontae Johnson to the offense helps the offense, but they need defensive help. If you're only going to help the offense and not the defense here, that to me is not the right way to approach this. If they can add a defensive player or two, then I think we can look back on this as we do, because I wanted to make sure that we separate the Diontae Johnson move from the other needs we've been talking about all show. But you separate those two. The Diontae Johnson move in a vacuum, I think, is a good one. I think it is. I think it helps. But they need help on the defensive side of the ball. So at this point, there are plenty of options for the Ravens. We are still a week away from actually almost, I think the trade deadline ends at, is it 4 p.m. next week? Is it 4? Let me see. It's either 4 or like 12 p.m. or something. Like it's a weird, they either changed it. Yeah. Okay. At 4 p.m. So we're almost exactly 24 hours, almost exactly a week away from the trade deadline coming up. And I saw a couple of these. Javon Walker could be another one. Jacksonville's not going anywhere right now. Maybe Jacksonville will make some of their young defensive players available. I'd be on board with it. They just need something. They need something. So we'll see. But Diontae Johnson officially a member of the Ravens, and we will see how he fits into that group led by Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. So, hey, you know what? Your updated wide receiver room on the way out here. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Diontae Johnson, Nelson Aguilar, Tylan Wallace, and Tez Walker. Solid group. But let's see what they can do defensively. So, overall, decent move for the Ravens when you're talking about it by itself. But still a long way to go. So I have to hear today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. On the way out, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube and in audio form. Be sure on the way out to hit that follow button and subscribe button as well. Again, we bring you 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. So we had an episode this morning. John Harbaugh hinted at a trade. Well, he certainly did, because now Diontae Johnson, a member of the Ravens. Coming up tomorrow, we're diving more into this Diontae Johnson move, talking about what it means and what else could be on the horizon for the Ravens from a trade perspective. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll be right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.